This is Pod Populi, podcast for the people.
Welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I have a very special guest in store for you today, Devin Burke. Welcome, Devin.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk sleep with you, Shivani.
Yes, for sure. So I met Devin years ago. We were put together by an amazing woman named Jessica Pfeffer, who hosted this retreat in Delray around sleep. And at the time, I was launching my brand new deep sleep tea. And so I was excited to create this event. And we had Leslie Glickman teach yoga that day at the retreat. We had you to give this profound lecture on sleep. I was just sitting there taking notes like, wow, I did not even know all this. And it really piqued my interest. And later, my team asked me to build a monthly series around sleep. Every month, we were teaching a topic. And so I taught sleep for 1 month. And I just dove into Ayurveda sleep and circadian rhythm. And I got so obsessed with sleep. And I've just been following your work. You make great videos on YouTube. You have the Sleep Science Academy. I've watched testimonials of your clients say they were insomniacs, they were suffering, they were at the end of their rope. They had tried all the sleep medications from their doctors. And I love when I find the practitioner who helps those people, like those people who suffer and have tried everything they could find, but were really seeking like a completely different solution and a practitioner who could hold their hand. And so I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
I'm excited to be here, and thank you for refreshing my memory of how we connected, because I was trying to remember too. I'm like, where was it? And that was a great day. That was a very fun day.
It was really nice.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel blessed and grateful to be able to do this work. And, this is why I'm here, is to really help those that feel like they're broken, that have tried all the things, the therapies, the doctors, and then are still really struggling with their sleep. Those are the people that we help. And we're quite good at it at this point, which is exciting for those that are struggling.
Absolutely. And so will you first kick off with what you do at Sleep Science Academy, how you help people, and then I want to hear the origin story. Like, how did you get into this? Because when I met you, I was like, that's a very niche topic. Just sleep. You're picking just sleep. But now, after years of knowing what you do and how important sleep is to the entire puzzle of health, I get it. I get why that's the deep dive topic.
Yeah. And honestly, I kind of stumbled into it. It wasn't through my own suffering or pain. It was through someone else's. And that was about 7 years ago. I was working with a lot of high performing clients, entrepreneurs, business owners. As you can imagine, most of them don't sleep well. And one particular person was really struggling, and he didn't want to be on the sleeping meds. And so I was like, all right, let me look into what other solutions are available. And I found something called CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. But a lot of the therapists were booked for months. There wasn't a lot of therapists actually available. And so I was like, okay, let me look into what this is. And I started to sort of understand some of the techniques and the tools of CBTI. And I was like, okay, let's just try some of these techniques and tools out. And my client got some success, but there were some areas that actually were creating more anxiety or making his sleep worse within that framework.
Wow.
So then I started to say, okay, well, that's interesting. Where can I pull from to kind of fill in these other places that CBTI could be detrimental to someone that's kind of taking that approach? And that kind of set me on this entire journey to understand sleep at a holistic level, meaning looking at how sleep impacts every area of our life and how every area of our life actually impacts sleep. So we view sleep at Sleep Science Academy as not a problem, but a symptom or a result. And what we do is we really support people, give them the tools and the understanding to see that, okay, if I'm not sleeping, and sleep is the most natural thing in the world, it's something that we were born to do. What is going on in how I'm being, in what's going on in my life, in what I'm doing or not doing that has this natural thing not happening? And so really the goal through our approach in our program is to really give people awareness, support, and tools to understand what is out of balance. How do we bring that back into balance so that sleep can happen?
It sounds like root cause medicine applied to sleep, and understanding that when you're not sleeping, there's a really good underlying reason for it. And we have to get into discovery mode and go find it, and not assume that Band-Aids on top are just going to fix it.
100%. That's
I love
exactly, that's the mindset. It's really, and it can be, it's difficult because people want quick fixes. People want to take, they want things solved quick. We're kind of programmed to have things fast, right? We live in this amazing world where we, at a touch of a finger, we can have groceries at our door, and unfortunately, when you are addressing root causes, as you're well aware, it's not always fast and it's not always easy. But it's worth it because you actually address it, and it can become something that you don't have to keep putting other band-aids on, wasting more time and money and continuing to suffer.
True. And so, what are some of those typical root cause issues that people end up discovering? A lot of times when people are in my program, like my 6 week Ayurveda program, if sleep is an issue, if it's a light issue, I can figure it out. And it's usually
Yeah.
around sleep pressure. I get them to move and exercise more, walk in nature. I reach into the circadian rhythm, circadian clock, Ayurveda toolkit first. And I always knew in my heart, if I couldn't fix it, you were my person.
Well, thank
But
you for that.
yeah, but what are you seeing societally? Because I know before we jumped on the call, we were talking about how in society right now, there's this idea of more, more, and more, and we want more. And so
Yeah.
I would imagine that one of the big issues, especially if you're talking about high performer clients and entrepreneurs, we're on this ride and this drive to win in our business, in our lives, and everything. That's how we're kind of made up. But then it's hard to hit the off switch.
Yes.
It's so hard to just flip that switch over. So what do you see as some of those underlying issues that are predominant?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big ones almost for everyone that we work with is just that. It's trying to force and control something that we have no control of, which is sleep. You cannot force or control sleep. Sleep is a happening. It's not something that you can make happen. And it's funny because in the world, usually the harder you try at something, the better you get at it. And we're so attached to outcomes. We're so attached to, having expectations of, if I do this, then if I, hire an amazing employee, he's going to perform well, right? If I study this and prepare for this presentation, there's a high chance that I'm going to perform well. With sleep, that's not the case. Sleep is a letting go. And most of us have a very, very hard time with letting go. We want to control, we want to be in control, we want to try. And if we feel out of control, we try more. And so this is one of the underlying patterns that I see almost with everyone that we work with, is a subtle or a very strong pattern of trying to force or control sleep through many different ways. And then what that does is it creates anxiety. It releases adrenaline or cortisol. It creates this, it puts sleep on this pedestal, and it creates this kind of grasping. And it's that very pattern. There's other ones, but that's one of the many primary patterns that then creates the body staying in a fight or flight, hyperaroused state, which doesn't allow rest to happen.
Right. And so what are some of the punishments? I've seen all the research on sleep, and to me, if people just got it, that sleeping well is the foundation of good health. It's the entire foundation. If you're going to build a house, you'd build the foundation first, then you get to build everything on top of it. So even with myself, I constantly work with functional medicine and different practitioners to fix my health and get it awesome. I shouldn't even say fix, to optimize my health, because it's already really great.
Good
I'm
upgrade.
always looking to be better, right? As we talked about. But if you're going to build a foundation first and you're going to put sleep in there first, then what happens? We're going to clear inflammation. We're going to clear the lymphatic system. We're going to give the brain the rest it needs. We're going to rejuvenate. Like, every system needs us to sleep. And yet, as a society, we're addicted to watching TV, getting our work done, social media, all these things, pushing sleep. And then we have to wake up when we have to wake up for our day. So will you speak into, for our audience today, like, what are those punishments? Because I'm one of those people, I have to hear the punishment. Like, I tell my practitioners, lecture me on the punishment of not taking the vitamin D. Then I'll remember to take it. I already know the
Yeah.
positives.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're pretty well versed in those punishments, but I can kind of harp on them a little bit more. And I want to put a disclaimer here, because for people that are listening to this that already are struggling with their sleep, this can create more fear, this can create more anxiety, and actually make them sleep worse. Because once you really understand how powerful and how important sleep is and how it is the foundation, when you're not getting it, then your mind just starts thinking, "Oh my God, I'm going to get Alzheimer's. Oh my God, I'm going to get cancer. Oh my God." And there is science studies that support when we don't get the sleep we need, we have a higher risk of Alzheimer's, higher risk of dementia, higher risk of heart disease. Our skin doesn't look as vibrant and bright. We are irritable. We're more emotional. We make poor decisions. Sometimes, those decisions cost us thousands of dollars. Sometimes those decisions cost us millions of dollars. I've seen it. And so, from a cognitive standpoint, we're not able to retain or remember information. We're not able to focus. And really, I mean, honestly, I believe this. If and when people really wake up to how important sleep is and start to prioritize and protect it, the world is going to get a better place. There's going to be less road rage, less abuse in relationships. Those things happen because people are underslept. They're irritable. They're angry. They're on edge. They're not thinking clearly. And these are all effects of not prioritizing and protecting sleep, beyond the physical effects of, again, our body's not clearing out cancer, the lymph system, which is like the lymph system for the brain, removing all the beta amyloid, all the plaque that builds up. So, I mean, I literally could go on and on. But there's not an area of your life that isn't either greatly negatively impacted or greatly positively impacted when we're connecting it to either more and better sleep or less and worse sleep.
So, Devin, when we met at that retreat, one interesting data point that I learned was, as I was talking about sleep and deep sleep tea and this thing I created, I just assumed everyone would want better sleep and they'd order the tea and it would be great. And all of a sudden, all the women came up to me and they were like, I actually sleep fine. I'm fine. And that's ruining my sleep. And it created this huge awareness around, what are we doing as partners to each other's sleep? Do we need to sleep in separate rooms? Like, what is the best way forward? Because above all, if you're not getting sleep, how can you even be great to each other in any given relationship? And that really changed my own approach to sleep. I was like, okay, any night that you are going to get phone calls and things, separate rooms. I need my sleep. And I've noticed I'm 100 times happier and nicer person if I get that. So will you share what you've seen when it comes to relationships and sleep and people impacting each other's sleep?
Yeah, this is a very common thing, and I'm so happy that you brought this up. And I love that you had that level of communication with your husband, because that's really what it takes. And there's nothing wrong with a sleep divorce, because it can actually prevent a real divorce, believe it or not. So meaning, like, sleeping in separate rooms, if you have the luxury of having a spare bedroom where you could go to, is a fantastic strategy. If someone is, somebody that snores, or somebody that, has to wake up in the middle of the night to take calls or whatever it is, you are going to be a better partner, and you're going to be a better husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, as a result of actually drawing some boundaries around the bedroom if your partner is struggling with sleep. And the best thing you could do is actually help them get the support they need. So sometimes I often hear people like, "Oh my God, my husband snores like a freight train. Like, what can you do?" And I always tell people, well, definitely go get, if your partner snores, that could be a sign of sleep apnea. So definitely get a sleep test done, because that's, definitely something that you want to take care of. There's all kinds of fun strategies like mouth taping for snoring, wearing, breathe right strips, or things that can open up the nasal passages. But really, it's around having first that conversation with your partner of why it's important that you both get sleep. And then creating, a plan around what that looks like for you, whether it's sleeping in separate bedrooms. Maybe you start in the bed together so that you still can be intimate, because that's the only danger of a sleep divorce, is it getting in the way of intimacy.
Right.
Because usually the bed is where couples are intimate, but you can be intimate in all kinds of places. You can get creative. But yeah, it is a real thing. And there actually is something that I kind of coined this term, at least I haven't heard anyone use it, sleep
Hmm.
envy, where partners that sleep really, that have really struggled with their sleep and partners that sleep really well, there starts to be this thing in the relationship where they become like very envious, and it creates a lot of frustration and sometimes resentment in the
Sure.
relationship, because there's like in the mind, you're like, oh my God, I want to sleep like that. Why can't I sleep like that? And like, how can he just go to sleep like that? And it creates this whole thing. And so that's definitely something to explore. And it's obviously that's not helpful if you're if it's getting in the way of you communicating and there's any type of negative emotion associated to it, you want to definitely explore that.
For sure. I can totally imagine that. If I wasn't the one who slept well, I would be envious. But in my case, my husband sleeps way later than I do. He wakes up way earlier than I do. He sees me sleeping soundly when he leaves for work. So it's just funny. I think about that sometimes,
Mm.
like, wow, I get all this perfect sleep because I planned for it, and I've always slept well, but I've invested in all the little things that help me sleep really well now. And it's interesting, but he can nap really well. Like on the weekend, he can take a 2.5 hour profound nap. And I'm always with the kids, like, I wish I could
Mm.
nap like him. So it's just interesting. You're right, that sleep envy can be created. And I
Napping is a
think,
luxury for sure. And that's actually one of the things
do you teach about napping and how good it is for you?
sorry, I think I do. So here's the caveat though. If you have insomnia, meaning, 3 or more nights a week, you're either having trouble falling or staying asleep and it's impacting your life, don't nap, because it reduces sleep pressure. But I just saw this really cool study that showed that people that don't have sleep issues that do nap live longer. It's connected to longevity, because it's such an amazing way of relaxing and de-stressing and putting the body back in a parasympathetic state in the middle of your day, which is what we all need, because we're all just hopped up on cortisol and adrenaline
True.
all day, coffee. And so napping is a fantastic longevity hack for sure, for those that don't
How
suffer
long
from
should you
insomnia.
nap? Because I always wonder, like, where's that tipping point?
Yeah, and I'm so happy you asked that, because there is a right, or a better, I should say, way of napping. You either want to nap through a full sleep cycle, or you want to nap where you don't get into the deeper stages of sleep. So about 20 minutes. After about 20 minutes, you're going to start to drop into those deeper stages of sleep. And then if you wake up, I don't know if you had the experience, Shivani, yourself, but I know I have, where I would sleep past 20 minutes, but I wouldn't go complete a full 90-minute sleep cycle. And I'd wake up and I'd feel tired and more
Yes.
groggy than when I went to sleep. And so if it's either like 20 minutes or a full sleep cycle, which would be about 90 to 110 minutes, depending on your circadian clock, how healthy it is. And, but I would say, 20 minutes, set your alarm for 25 minutes, give yourself 5 minutes of some breathing, grounding practices, and just kind of letting yourself sort of drift off. And then kind of come out 20 minutes later,
I
refreshed.
love that. I have 3 questions to that. My first one, do you still believe in measuring? Because when we met, you were talking about the aura ring, and I love the aura ring. I do think it has some deficiencies to it because I feel like the sleep score is not always right for me. But a lot of people love the
Hmm.
Whoop and the aura. So do you believe in sleep measurement? Or in your case, with some of these clients, does it kind of push them in the wrong direction?
Yeah, so I actually do like measuring only when you have support, because what can happen is people measure their sleep, but they don't have the proper tools or support, and then it keeps telling them, okay, you're sleeping bad, your readiness isn't good, and they're like, okay, well, I got to try this and I got to try that, and they're trying all these things and those things aren't working. Now they're getting anxious, and it creates this whole sort of pattern of grasping and trying to sleep, which we know doesn't work. So if you have the proper support, if you're working with a practitioner that understands sleep, I think it can be useful. And in particular, with people that struggle with insomnia, there's this phenomenon called sleep misperception, where most people that don't sleep, and I'm talking sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night, they actually perceive that they're sleeping less. They perceive that they're sleeping only an hour a night, but they're actually getting 3 to 4 hours, which is still not enough. So in those cases, having the data show them you're actually sleeping 3 or 4 hours, not an hour, is actually comforting. It's actually like, oh, wow, actually I'm sleeping a little bit more than I actually thought. And so that can kind of move us in a positive direction, but yet no device is accurate. Really, I mean, the Oura Ring has a lot of data at this point. It has gotten better. It is, some of the metrics are much more accurate than others. But I really do believe that you can't master what you don't measure. And if you care about something, I think measuring it can be a good idea.
That makes sense. And then when it comes to caffeine, when do you believe we need to cut off on caffeine? Because I drink green tea throughout the day and I'm moving that time back. I would go as late as 6. Now I've moved to 5 to 4. I'm trying to move it to 3 now because I'm like, well, sleep is the most important thing. You should be able to have your last cup in time and just stop.
Yeah. Do you know if you're a fast metabolizer of caffeine? Have you ever done any genetic testing?
I've done DNA testing, but I didn't look for that piece of it.
Yeah, so you probably, depending on the DNA test that you took, you might even be able to go back and look in that data, and it'll show you what type of metabolizer you are. And so that does factor into caffeine and timing. So caffeine blocks adenosine. Adenosine is a neurochemical that creates sleepiness. And definitely the half-life of caffeine, depending on who you ask, depending on how fast a metabolizer you are, can be up, it could be even 8 hours if you're like a really slow metabolizer. So that means that's in your system for 16. So, unfortunately, there are benefits to caffeine, right? But really trying to get your caffeine in like earlier on and then letting that second cup of coffee or that late evening tea, maybe having like an herbal tea instead of something caffeinated, that's like the strategy to go. And I'm a huge tea drinker. I love tea. And I love caffeine too. I mean, it's an amazing drug.
It is. Whenever I'm in I have certain seasons. I live according to the seasons. So when I'm in my on seasons at work, I am caffeine my green tea every 3 hours and I just go. And then right now I'm in my slow season. It's the summer. And so in the summer, I make sure I downshift. And one of the ways I downshift is I cut back on green tea or anything that's stimulating. So yeah, I think using it strategically is good. But again, if it's ever at the expense of sleep, I think it's so important to know your line well. And so I'm testing that line. And I do think that I know later tea affects sleep. So
for sure. And a little hack, you could supplement with L-theanine, the amino acid L-theanine, or put some mushrooms like cordyceps or reishi or chaga, some of the functional mushrooms. You could put that, well, maybe not in your tea. I don't know how that would taste,
alongside,
but you could put it in your coffee. It doesn't taste too bad. Yeah, and that would help buffer. That would help give the adrenal glands some support, so that it's not such a hard hit to your system. And that's also a really kind of, little secret hack there for all the caffeine people listening to this.
We need the hacks nowadays, Devin. The thing is, I think so many of us are so used to, at least for me, I have a racetrack and I've decided what that racetrack is. And even though I want to always take care of my health really beautifully, the motivation and drive and the person I am wants to see the end result of creating this thing I've created in the world. So there's always that juxtaposition of, all right, I'm going to go and I'm going to build and I'm going to impact. It's going to be awesome. And simultaneously knowing full well at the intellectual level what not focusing on your health means. So when it comes to this topic of cortisol and adrenaline, how do you approach that with your clients who are in the entrepreneurial game of trying to do great things or having to work a lot? Like I have people around me who work really intense job, really intense careers. They're not going to step out of those anytime soon. But how do you reconcile the modern day world where we're kind of working beyond what the body can do, but then honor that the body and adrenals need some support?
Yeah, it's a loaded question. And I'll start off by saying what I've noticed is that people actually become addicted to their own stress hormones. Meaning cortisol and adrenaline, it's like it becomes a drug for certain people, especially entrepreneurs. And so there's the physiological sort of addiction to that. And so, so for some people, it's like really checking in. Is that me? Do I feel like I need, if I'm not having this like go, 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 I don't feel alive. I don't feel, I don't feel good physically and mentally. That's a sign that you could be addicted to your own stress chemicals, which is fascinating that that can even happen. I think it's a modern world challenge. So the question then is like, well, what do we do about it? And so one of the things that I found so helpful for people that are in this kind of circumstance is really, number one, getting super clear on boundaries, and then just taking little energy, like really honoring the breaks. Because if we go from the next thing to the next thing and there's not these little rests, like sleep is a result of rest. Most of us do not rest, which is why most of us do not sleep. So like even micro rest where you're doing some Ayurvedic practices, like maybe it's some breath pranayama, breath work, or some grounding, or some of the things that you are teaching your clients, and like really prioritizing that. And it's hard because it's like if you're in the flow and you're focused and you have goals, it's like, sometimes there's like in the back of our heads, it's like, well, if I slow the train down, it's going to take a lot to get that train back up to speed. But what I found is when you learn to kind of downshift throughout your day and you really honor that, it makes such a difference for the body remembering how to turn off. And there's not so much pressure that builds up in the mind body system that needs to be released towards the end of the day. So it makes it so much easier for the body then to remember how to just let go and for sleep to happen.
That was profound. That's so true. I've never thought of it that way, that sleep is a result of rest. Like, talk about a bomb. Like, that is so profound, because we oftentimes think sleep is the reward you get at the end of a day where you just worked so hard and you're so exhausted, and thus it should be obvious. But I think what we're learning for so many in modern day times is you're running at 200 miles an hour trying to crash into the wall of sleep, and it doesn't come, and you're shocked because, like you said at the beginning, you're trying to control it. And in my world as a mom, there's quarters to my day, and sometimes you hit fourth quarter and you're just trying to get this house to agree that we're all going to go to bed. No one's listening. I get so frustrated because I'm like, no one honors sleep around here. You people are all crazy. And so now I have my own schedule. I'm like, everyone, I'm going to bed. And I just get up and leave. And I assume everyone's going to sleep when they're going to sleep, because it's to me such a disrespect and dishonoring that if I have said I sleep by 10 and you guys are all partying like rock stars at 10, obviously we're not on the same page. So I just say, I'm good. I go upstairs, I take my shower, I close my blackout blinds, I settle into my ritual for sleep. And if we could have what is the word? If we could have the honoring of oneself, that's how I've been thinking of it today, to take tiny little breaks in our day, what a different life we would lead. But why don't we give ourselves the break? And I think one reason is what you just said. The fear of the downshift is you'll lose your momentum. Because I have that fear. I'm like, okay, I've got my business day. I'm just going to get caffeinated and get going. And I go. But then you hit 3:00. If you don't take any breaks, you start to crash. And that's when you're going to reach for food or different things to kind of build the energy back up. But had you taken the micro breaks, maybe you didn't have to have those crashes that happen.
Yeah, I've seen it literally with, at this point, thousands of people. It's extraordinary to actually witness when somebody really has the revelation and implements this. And it's a simple thing, but it's not an easy thing. And I think there's another whole piece to this below the surface, specifically for high performing entrepreneurs, people that are up to big things, is feeling like you're never doing enough, or you could always do more. And that is a very pervasive thought that then drives people through honoring the rest and then leads to burnout or leads to, using food for comfort or checking out with social media or, all the other ways that people kind of deal with uncomfortable sensations of fatigue and burnout. And yeah, it's tough. I mean, also from like a social programming, that's so rewarded to like accomplish, to achieve, to do more. And you see on social media like all of these influencers talking about it, and you're like, oh, you start comparing yourself to them, like, wow, they got these amazing businesses and they get like a million things done in a day. Like, I need to do more, and we should be. And then all the shoulds come, and it's like it's almost a form of abuse. Like, I look at it from my own standpoint because I used to really be that way, and I've learned to be so much kinder and more gentle with myself and allow myself to be like, you know what, it's okay to just take even a longer break than you normally would. Like, and I'll tell you what, like, it's made such a difference in my overall mental health and physical
Nice.
health. Like, I'm able to breathe better. And I've seen this in clients as well when they really, have honored the practice of the micro breaks, the rest throughout the
You
day.
said two things that are interesting. One was before we can get addicted to our own cortisol and adrenaline. And now you've said sometimes we can't even kind of help ourselves when we get in this mode of do more, be more productive. There's always more to do. Both resonated with me. I was like, oh God, that was me in the spring. In the spring, I went in this mode of like, I'm going to ramp up the whole business 200% so I can take June off and my team is not going to call me or talk to me. And I sped up at a rate that I've never done before because I proved to myself I can push everything out of my life, my social life, self-care. I pushed a lot out of the way just to grind. But that grind took a toll and I knew it would. And I can usually, as a practitioner, play. Like, you can adaptogenically support, you can focus on sleep, like you can do just the guardrails that hold you together. And that's not good, but you know how. And so I worked and I did it. I totally won. All my goals that I was going for happened all of a sudden. And then I did leave and I slowed down so much. I went to Italy and lived with my kids there. And I thought, what did you just do? Like, you are so addicted to that pace now. It took me at least a week just to be like, reading in the afternoon is just fine. You may read a book. It's okay to chill. So it's been interesting to try to calibrate back. Like, what is enough? What is not enough? Because to me now, only that level of productivity feels good enough. And then on top of it, when you get addicted to success is not the right word, but achieving your goals one after another, that can be a very addictive phase. And according to the Ayurvedic calendar, you have to take certain seasons on and off. You can't go year round like a crazy person. So how do you guide your high performing clients to like balance this idea? Because if we're not going to balance it, we know we're going to burn out the body.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the person. I don't want to just say, I don't think it's wrong to kick it in super high gear and get in your race car and just like achieve and just for a period of time. Where it becomes detrimental is if you don't have the awareness to let off the gas. And most people, unfortunately, because when you're in the race car, it's exhilarating. You're seeing the things that you want to happen, and it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Most people don't take their foot off the gas. And it's because, again, that fear of, if I take my foot off the gas, then, there's a lot to that. Like, I'm not going to be doing enough, or things might go backwards, or I'm going to drop, whatever it is. There's all these stories connected to that. So I think it's like, I'm a big believer in the more you know yourself and the more awareness you can have around how you operate and what's appropriate for you without judgment, the better off and the more you're going to understand when to really let off the gas and know how. And so it's really, I think it really comes down to the individual, and it comes down to what you value, and what you value changes. It might change during the season. It might change month to month. It might change week to week, or it might be really consistent. So it's one of these things that I think the more you can just ask yourself powerful questions like, how am I feeling right now? What do I need? Is this a day where I can really push it, or is this a day where I need to kind of let off the gas? And then really listen to what your body is telling you. And that presupposes that you are in touch with your body, right? So the first stage would be getting in touch with your body, because most of us are just live in our heads. The second stage would actually be listening to the signals that your body is giving you. And then if you do that, it's going to really set yourself up for sustainable go, relax, rest and retreat, go. And that's, again, everyone kind of has different capacities based off of so many things: your environment, your genetics, your upbringing, your natural gifts. So it's really, I think it's a matter of just really knowing yourself. And that takes asking deep questions, that takes a desire to really go deep. And that, to me, I found is the most useful sort of recommendation. And there's people that can support you in that, getting support. Like, that's what we do. So, so that's what I would say.
I love that answer, because it's so true. Even as a practitioner, I am always working with somebody, and that's how I level up, whether it's in my business or on my health. So in any given season, usually it's in the summer where I make a lot more space in my life. I'm a bit the fire. I got to make the space in the summer or else everything burns down. So in the summer, usually when I orient back towards health, and I'm like, okay, well, where do we need to optimize a little more, give ourselves a little more, so we're ready for that fall season and getting back on the tracks. So I love that answer, because you're right. You have to know thyself. You have to know your template, know who you are, know what your own physical, mental, emotional limitations are. Then you know how far you can push.
Yes.
And then maybe we need to stop just 10, 20% short of that and not always go all the way to that edge,
That's the key. And I think you have to know what the edge is for you, because it's going to be different. Your edge is going to be different than someone else's edge. And I think one of the challenges that most people have is they compare themselves with other people, and they look at other people's edges, and then they think that's their edge. And that might not be your edge. That might not be. You maybe can go further, right? Or maybe that's like you're nowhere close to that person just because how they're made up and their experience and their gifts, and that's fine. It's okay. So that's the comparison thing is a big thing too, and we do it constantly. It's called being a human, but really knowing when you're doing it, I think is a really important thing, because then you can stop and just check in with yourself.
So Devin, I feel like I could definitely talk to you all day. I feel like we should connect more and get to chat more often. Is there anything we didn't cover today that you would like to share with our audience? Any message where you're like, I didn't get to share this, and that's an important thing to me right now?
Yeah, I would say that I appreciate the question. The answer, so a lot of times people, unfortunately right now, are taking sleeping medication. And we didn't talk about that. And I think that, there's a time and a place for medication, and this is not medical advice, but medication is a Band-Aid, and there's a real cost to relying on medication. And there's also other ways of naturally restoring your ability to sleep. And so if you're currently taking a medication, do your homework on what you're taking, because often I find a lot of people don't really understand that these medications are only meant to be used for a couple of weeks. And if you use them longer for weeks and you start to look at the inserts, you might be surprised what you find.
Absolutely. There's a lot of side effects to whatever we take and do. Herbal, non-herbal, doesn't matter. We have to look at what we're taking and what it's going to do to us. So thank you for sharing that. And where can people find you and all your amazing content that you share on this topic?
Oh, thank you. Sleep Science Academy. So Sleep Science Academy, YouTube, we have an Instagram, TikTok, and all those fun things. So, but YouTube is really, I like YouTube because it's a little bit more in depth. All these other platforms, you just get little snippets. but sleepscienceacademy.com is where you
Awesome.
can
Well,
find
thank
us.
you so much for coming on the podcast today. I always love learning from you. You are a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. And I love that you're helping people who have such big sleep issues. It's a big topic. It is an epidemic. People need to understand how dangerous it is not to get proper sleep. And so thank you for being a practitioner on people's journey when it comes to this topic.
You're welcome. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to share it with your listeners. And it's lovely to connect with you as well.
Thank you, everyone who tuned in today on the Fusionary Health Podcast. Share this episode with someone who needs it. Help us get the word out that there's always natural integrative approaches and new approaches that we can all use to optimize our health each and every day. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health Podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.